up to Kessel. Drives up to the Detroit line. Left wing, left side. Going to Malkin. A wrister. He shoots and scores. He slings it right to the net from 27 feet away. And Evgeny Malkin has scored his second goal, and the Penguins now lead by the score of 3-1. Oh, stop the press. Malkin's on fire.
Rangers, Bunieves, and Islander ice left wing corner. Turned it over to Eberle, and here comes Barzal again. 3-on-2 through center to Beauvillier. Top of the left circle to Barzal. In front, save, rebound, he scores! Matt Barzal converts his own rebound, has his second goal of the period, and that makes it 4-1 Islanders. Worked on by Thomas Hickey. Comes in the right wing.
10 seconds.
Skated out to center. Here he comes. 3-on-2 over the Ranger line. Hits Chimera on the left. To Clutterbuck down the slot. Shoots and scores! Cal Clutterbuck makes it 7-2 Islanders.
Yeah, wow, what a performance by the New York Islanders. I believe that was Brendan Burke on the call on the New York Islanders radio network. Wow, and 7-2 win over the New York Rangers. Matthew Barzal at 15 goals on the season now. And this is Hockey Primetime. I'm Conor McKenna. Welcome to the show. You also heard from the Pittsburgh Penguins there. 4-1 winners over the Detroit Red Wings earlier today. That was the second goal for Evgeny Malkin, who's now got 19 on the season, tying him with Phil Kessel for, I believe, the team lead there in Pittsburgh. It's Hockey Prime Time. Happy Saturday afternoon, wherever you might be. I'm here in Montreal at the Hockey Prime Time studio, and we are buried in snow. We got 36 centimeters of snow in Montreal in the last, I don't know, I'm going to say like 18 hours or so, maybe 20 hours. Not even though. No, 20 is probably pretty good. But since about 9 p.m. last night, we got 36 centimeters of snow. So if you're like me, you don't know what that means. Like, what is 36 centimeters? Like, I got a ballpark idea, but like, what's 36 centimeters? I need the number in inches. And we got 14 inches of snow in Montreal in the last 20 hours. So we got one of the biggest snowstorm of the year so far. We've already had a ton, and the entire city is basically buried under over a foot of snow. And I'm hoping it's not falling anymore. I've had to shovel a couple of times today already. How bad is it? It's so bad that doctors are warning people to be careful out there, to not overdo it with the shoveling, because as any Canadian can tell you, that it's relatively common for people to suffer heart attacks and die while shoveling. And although I'm hopefully young enough that that's not really a concern for me, how bad is it? The Urgence Santé, the group in Montreal that I don't know exactly how to describe them, but they sort of, I think, run the hospitals and the ambulance service. It gave a warning to people saying, do not leave your house. The big problem is we had freezing rain yesterday. So you get freezing rain and then you get snow on top of that. It creates very dangerous driving conditions. So you know it's bad when you've got the people running hospitals saying, do not leave your house unless you absolutely have to leave your house. So I took their advice. You know, I was planning on going out, doing some volunteer work today, maybe feeding the homeless. But once I heard that, they don't want me to go out, I mean, I've got to take the advice of the people running things in this province, right? So yes, what do we have going on here in Montreal? The Canadiens have been on a bye week, and it's been a little bit boring. Maybe that's why I'm so zoned in on the weather, because of how boring the bye week has been. Last year's bye week for the Canadiens, Habs fans will remember, and this is where the only time we're going to dive in on the Canadiens, as we normally do on the show here, based in Montreal. Always talk a little bit of Canadiens, although they're in danger of maybe becoming completely irrelevant as soon as later on tonight. But last year's bye week was very different for Canadiens fans, and if you'll flash back, if you'll close your eyes and go back in time with me, it was in mid-February, and the Canadiens decided shortly after Claude Julien had been fired by the Boston Bruins that they were going to fire Michel Therrien and strike while the iron is hot and go out and get Claude Julien to coach their team, and maybe that would sort of put them over the top. They were in first place at the time. Not every day a coach gets fired with his team in first place. And it's been remarkable to see the fortunes of the two teams who are meeting tonight, the Bruins and the Canadiens, meeting tonight at the Bell Center, the first of 3 meetings between the two teams in the next week, meeting for the first time this year, and meeting Claude Julien is meeting the Bruins for the first time since being fired by the team. It's remarkable how the fortunes of the two teams have changed and sort of gone in complete opposite directions since that date. And the Bruins are I think, one of the great stories. I think probably the most surprising team in the Eastern Conference so far this year. Bruce Cassidy's done a heck of a job, and clearly, I mean, I don't know how you could say that it doesn't seem like the Bruins made a great move here, that they really have sort of improved things. Meanwhile, I don't think it's Claude Julien's fault, and I believe Claude Julien's a better coach than Michel Therrien is. I really do. But the Canadiens have not become a better team under Claude Julien than they were under Michel Therrien. I think the proof is there. The proof is in the pudding. And you see them now. The Canadiens are languishing, and thanks to the Buffalo Sabres, they're at least not at the bottom of the division. But they certainly could end up there before too long, especially if the Bruins keep up doing what they're doing. The Habs have a 2-game winning streak, which by their standards is really good. How about the Bruins, though? Jeez, I mean, they've got 1 regulation loss in their last 15 games. This team in second place have 5 games in hand. 5 games in hand on the Leafs. The Bruins haven't even played their 41st game. They're the only team in the NHL, and at least I believe they are the only team in the NHL that has not yet hit the halfway point of their schedule. The Bruins, and actually the San Jose Sharks as well, played 40 games. So the Bruins will finally hit the halfway point of their schedule tonight and have a chance to stretch their lead over Toronto for second place in the division well, they're actually tied at 53 points, so they'd have 2 points of a lead over Toronto, and would be amazingly 10 points behind the Tampa Bay Lightning. So as good as the Bruins have been with a 23-10-7 record, Tampa Bay just the class of the division and really the league with that 31-10-3 mark on the season, just 10 regulation losses. So the Bruins looking very good. I mean, what else can you say? And clearly this is an organization that's moving in the right direction. Things are really trending upwards. I wonder if maybe some of the people in the organization might not be a little bit surprised just how good this Boston team has been this year. Meanwhile, the Canadiens are 8 points out of a wild card spot, and it looks very much like it's over. I think only the most optimistic of people are trying to pretend otherwise. So it's over for the Montreal Canadiens this year. It's probably, I think, the writing appears to be on the wall for the general manager of the team, that I think it's probably over for their general manager as well, that the Marc Bergevin era is over. And you know, we can look at it once, if in fact, and when in fact, because that's it. We know eventually it will be over. So when it's over, we can evaluate it and we can sort of look. And I think what I'd like to do is compare and contrast it with the other general managers that the team has had in the last decade or so. So that would be Bob Gainey, Pierre Gauthier, and Marc Bergevin. And who was the best and who was the worst general manager for the team. And it's amazing what a little bit of time and perspective and distance can do. But geez, does the Pierre Gauthier era not look nearly as bad as it did in comparison? The era of Pierre Gauthier as general manager of the team netted them many of the players who are actually good, whereas they've had a lot of difficulty drafting under Marc Bergevin. They've had even more trouble developing players under Marc Bergevin, and they've made trades that have ranged from catastrophic to bad to the occasional trade that actually helped the organization and sent them going in the right direction. So anyway, it's well, we'll see. But I think if I was going to rank them right now, the general managers of the last the recent memory, let's say, I'd say number 1 would be Gauthier, number 2 would be Gainey, and number 3 would be Marc Bergevin, who has sort of overseen this turnover in the franchise. Just little things, right? Like I was reading a story recently, just actually an hour or so ago, about the Dallas Stars, doing a little research for a segment that we're doing later on today here. And reading about Greg Pateryn. Greg Pateryn is a player who is a spare part here in Montreal. Couldn't make it as a defenseman. I always like the guy, right? I mean, he's not, and Dallas Stars fans will tell you the same thing. That Greg Pateryn, I mean, he's not out here setting the world alight. He hits guys hard. He's got a good shot, and he appears to be an NHL defenseman. He can play in the NHL. He's 27 years old, and the Canadiens traded him away for Jordie Benn. Now, Jordie Benn has more points. He has more goals and more points than Patterson does, but that's the only place he has the edge. Patterson's playing more. The advanced stats tell the story that Patterson has been a better performer for his team than Ben has, and Ben's been good for the Canadians. But it just and the way Stars fans are looking at this, apparently, at least according to the piece that I read, is that this trade was a win for Jim Nill. He won that trade that he made with Marc Bergevin, and really, I mean, it's honestly hard to find a trade that Marc Bergevin has won since he started making trades. I think you'd have to be crazy to argue that he won at this point, to argue that he won the PK Subban for Shea Weber trade. I mean, I don't know what basis you would evaluate it on, but based on the performances of both players, based on the performances of both teams, I don't know how you could say that the Canadians won the Shea Weber trade. And I guess anybody can talk themselves into anything if they want right now. And listen, we got a long way to go. I think you got to be crazy to evaluate the Jonathan Drouin for Mikhail Sergachev trade today and say one team won the trade and one team didn't. You're talking about a 22-year-old player in Drouin and a 19-year-old player in Mikhail Sergachev, who may be in the mix for a nomination in the Rookie of the Year race later on, and that is something that we'll touch on later on today. But this kid could be, he could be a Calder Trophy nominee. I don't know if he will be. You've got a strong class this year, but he does have more points. Not only does Sergachev have more points than Jonathan Drouin this year, Sergachev, who's a rookie defenseman, has more points than Drouin, who's allegedly a number one center, or at least he was until Marc Bergevin spoke on Sunday. He has more points than Drouin. So the kid, the defenseman, has more points than the experienced forward. And he actually has more points than any player on the Montreal roster does. So it's hard to say that he won that trade. So even when you're looking at the big trades, it's not looking great. And even when you look at the small ones, it doesn't look all that great. Trading away Sven Andrighetto to the Colorado Avalanche and getting back Andreas Martinson. Sven Andrighetto is an NHL player. He looks like he's a player. He's not a star. He's not ever going to win any major trophies in the National Hockey League, but he is an effective NHL player, and they traded him away for a guy who's not in the NHL anymore. And that is sort of a distressing pattern, I think, for Canadians fans. If you're looking at that trade record, if you're looking at the record of maybe losing guys on waivers, like Mark Barberio, another example of a guy who is he's a quality NHL player. He's not, I'm not saying he's a first pairing defenseman. I am saying he's better than several of the people that Marc Bergevin had out there this year, and namely Joe Morrow. And I can think of a couple of other guys as well. So there's a distressing track record of poor player evaluation. It's hard to get good players. It's hard to find NHLers, and it's even harder if you're sort of quick to pull the trigger and get rid of serviceable guys and replacing them with guys who aren't as good as they are. And that is sort of what Marc Bergevin seems to do quite a lot of. So tonight, it's the Canadians and the Bruins. It's an 7 o'clock start from the Bell Center in Montreal. The Habs play the Bruins tonight. They play the Bruins on Wednesday night in Boston at TD Garden, and then they play them here at the Bell Center again next Saturday night. So we're probably going to know a lot more about the Canadians by the time those three games are over. Right now, Montreal trails Boston by a country mile. I mean, they're 13 points behind the Bruins as action starts tonight. I guess you could argue that they could conceivably pull within 7 points by taking all three games, although that is a hard scenario to imagine. Again, as we mentioned, just one regulation loss in the Bruins' last 15 games is a good hockey team. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Boston Bruins. Our next guest is a features writer for NHL, the NHL.com website, and she'll be joining us in just a few minutes. Her name is Amalie Benjamn. The Bruins are on fire. They've got everything going for them right now. Brad Marchand's going to the All-Star game. Patrice Bergeron had 4 goals the other night in one game. How about David Backes coming back from diverticulitis? Amalie has a great feature about that. 10 inches of colon removed. How do you rehab from something like that? Well, the answer may surprise you. So we'll talk to Amalie Benjamn about the Red Hot Bruins next. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. We're also on Facebook Live. We're streaming so you can watch the video. Producer Laura Saba, that's how bad the weather is. Laura couldn't make it. She's such a trooper normally, but apparently 14 inches of snow is where you got to draw the line. So no Laura Saba this week, but she did put the show together for us, and she will always be available to help us out if needed. So Stick around for Amalie Benjamn, and we're with you until 7 o'clock tonight. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio, Facebook Live, Periscope, YouTube Live, probably other places as well. Check it out at hockeyprimetime.com.
Bruins with a slim 1-goal lead. Pasternak to the right circle. Centers fired. They score! Pasternak faked the shot. Sent it over to the far circle for Marchand, who snapped it home. 3-1 Bruins.
3-2-1. Yeah, there's been a lot of that lately. The Boston Bruins are absolutely on fire right now. Just one regulation loss in their last 15 games. And I'd say the best surprise in the National Hockey League, non-Vegas Golden Knights category. Right? Nobody saw that coming. I'm sure somebody out there saw this coming from the Bruins. Nobody, you can't tell me, and you can try to find it, but nobody saw that coming for the Vegas Golden Knights, right? So, yeah, we're about halfway through the schedule and back to work tonight for the Bruins. They're at the Bell Center. We got over a foot of snow in Montreal today, so I'm not sure if my next guest is sad that she's not on the road with the Bruins anymore. She's a feature writer for NHL.com after years on the beat covering the Bruins. Amalie Benjamn is here. Hello, Amalie.
Hello. I get to spend today talking to Willie O'Ree, so, you know, I don't mind not being in Montreal tonight.
Yeah, no kidding. That's cool. And is that for something you have coming up, or?
That is. There's a lot of anniversary celebrations this week, so that'll be on NHL.com on Wednesday.
Cool. All right, and yeah. So what a week coming up for the Bruins. They got the Canadiens tonight. The Habs are in Boston on Wednesday night, and then back at the Bell Center next Saturday night. After the teams have not met, this is the first time they've met. It's the first time that Claude Julien is facing the Bruins since they fired him last year. What do you make of the rivalry at this point, with the Bruins sort of trending upwards, the Habs trending so far downwards? I mean, you saw it, I know, sort of at its peak a couple of years back. How does it feel, a Habs-Bruins game to you at this point?
You know, it probably wouldn't feel nearly as exciting if you didn't have the Claude Julien factor into the mix this year, given, as you mentioned, you know, how different the team's fortunes are right now. We've seen it sort of a lot of times or occasionally the opposite way, where you've had the Canadians really soaring and the Bruins falling a little flat, but not as much this way. So fortunately, you have old coach, old team factor to sort of spice things up a little, and you couldn't make it any more fun than 3 times in the next week. I mean, that's pretty crazy. You know, you could say it's almost like a sort of a mini playoff series where you see these teams, you know, facing each other over and over and over, all in a short period of time.
And for the Bruins too, I guess, does it feel like found money at all? Like, and maybe I'm a little bit on the other side. Like, I just did not see this coming from the Bruins. I thought they would be fortunate to make the playoffs, period. And when at this point, I mean, other than the fact that they're chasing the best team in hockey, they're neck and neck with the Bruins right now. But are you surprised that they're as good as they are this year?
Yeah, I think everyone is. I mean, you had so many X factors with this team. There's so many rookies playing. I mean, if you look at their defense, you have 3 players who are right now first or second year players. You couldn't expect a team with that much youth on the back end to be this good. I mean, we saw some good things from Brandon Carlo last year. We obviously saw some good things from Charlie McAvoy in the playoffs, but that doesn't necessarily, you know, indicate that you're going to have a team that is this good, and this good defensively, especially. You think, okay, maybe they'll survive on their offense, but you know, their defensemen have some growing pains. But haven't been a lot of growing pains around this Boston team.
It is amazing, and there is the big ones, the guys that everybody's talking about, guys like Charlie McAvoy, but there's other guys as well. Like, I don't even know if I'm saying his name right because I haven't watched a lot of Bruins games this year, but Danton Heinen.
You got it, Danton Heinen. Yeah, exactly. You have Danton Heinen, you have Anders Bjork, you have Jake DeBrusk, you have Sean Corrali, Nola Char. You know, it goes pretty deep with these rookies and you know, players with, you know, maybe 1 or 2 years experience. There's a lot of them. So, I mean, I guess, you know, you wouldn't have looked at the start of the season, okay, you know, the Bruins can throw together a line with Danton Heinen, Riley Nash, and David Backes and have it be a pretty darn good line. That's not something that literally anybody expected.
We're talking Amalie Benjamn at NHL.com, where she writes features, including one on David Backes that I want to get to in a minute. But before we do, I know you also recently wrote about Patrice Bergeron, and having covered the Bruins for the last decade, the Patrice Bergeron era, so to speak, you've witnessed one of the best all-around players in the NHL over the course of his career. But how does a 5.4 goal game stack up with all the great performances you've seen?
Well, what's really funny is that this isn't a guy who collects goals that way. I mean, I was actually, in all, as you mentioned, all the times I've seen Patrice Bergeron, I didn't realize that he had only had 1 hat trick in his career. And it had been a while. So for him to come in and score 4 goals, I mean, a few of them were opportunistic, but anytime you're going to have a 4-goal, 5-point game, you're doing something right. And you really see, it was sort of the epitome of what that line can do when it's going really well, when there's just sort of that sixth sense between Brad Marchand and Bergeron, and you add Pasternak in there, and you know, that really has to be absolutely one of the best lines in hockey. I mean, hard to argue with that sort of Stamkos-Kucherov situation in Tampa, but you know, they can pretty much stack up against just about anybody in hockey.
What about the fact that it was a Brad Marchand and not to Bergeron that was named to the All-Star team? I mean, based on the seasons and the numbers, I guess it makes sense. But what do you think? I mean, it's all about star power. Is Marchand now a bigger star than Bergeron?
That would be hard to say that he's a bigger star. I mean, he's certainly more brash. He certainly has more people who have pro and con opinions of him. He brings out more fire, I think, for people than Patrice Bergeron does. But you know, it's so hard to separate one of those players from the other because they have really formed this bond that has benefited both players. There's no question that they have played off each other and learned and worked together so well. You know, I think Bergeron's always going to be the bigger star, but Brad Marchand, to the surprise of many, is a really talented player. I think he's still, you know, we talk about Patrice Bergeron being underrated. I think Brad Marchand's a little bit underrated too. He doesn't get the accolades. We hear so much about him for, sort of the scrabbles he gets into on the ice and maybe the tricky situations he gets himself into. But for his sheer talent, he doesn't get the praise that maybe he deserves.
With Amalie Benjamn, who writes for NHL.com, based in Boston. We're talking about the Bruins, who are in action tonight at 7 o'clock at the Bell Center in Montreal. And David Backes will be there. I was reading what you wrote about him. Diverticulitis, yowza, 10 inches of colon removed. That, for as far as injuries go, I'm sure not a very common one in the hockey world. How does one rehab or recover from an injury like that?
He recovered remarkably quickly, remarkably well. He was really only inactive about a couple days. He was back on a bike 7 days later. He was doing sit-ups for his doctor 2 weeks later, and he was having Paul Postma hit him in the corner to make sure he was ready 3 weeks later. It's crazy. Honestly, I have had a similar, not exactly the same, but a similar surgery, and I certainly know that I could not have played hockey. I was having trouble walking a couple weeks later, but certainly would not have been playing hockey. I believe it was 27 days later after he had 10 inches of his colon removed. It's just, we talk so much about how tough hockey players are, and there is a question of when tough becomes perhaps foolish. And I know his wife had some questions about that, but he's certainly come back strong from the illness and from this intense surgery.
And as you say here in the article here, that doctors have told him, and obviously they know a lot about this type of thing, that he was nearly certain to have another case if he chose not to have the surgery, and that the next time could include a rupture, which would certainly be a lot worse. So yeah, wow. 8 weeks expected recovery time. The guy's back in less than 4. That is pretty impressive stuff. Hey, before I let you go here, because I know you got to run. So I asked you before, but you're not. I assume you're not traveling as much as you were when you were on the Bruins beat, are you?
I am not. No, I'm doing sort of more selected trips. I'll be in Tampa for the All-Star game. I have a trip that I recently took to Tampa for a Steven Stamkos piece that's also coming up around All-Star time. Well,
let me ask you this. As someone who I believe, based on what I know of you, is a bit of a connoisseur of fine food, what is the NHL thing you miss eating on the road the most from your days traveling with the Bruins?
Ooh, that's a very good question. There's some, I have to say, there's some really good places in Montreal. I was talking to a friend recently, and I had gotten a chance to go to Liverpool House when I was there, and that's pretty hard to beat.
You know what? That might be my favorite restaurant in the city, so I can't disagree with you there. Amalie Benjamn, thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and I hope we can talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. You too.
That's Amalie Benjamn of NHL.com. I'm Conor McKenna. This is Hockey Primetime. Nice to be with you on this lovely, lovely Saturday evening. What do we have going on in the next 30 minutes or so? We're going to talk goaltending. I think the Winnipeg Jets really are one of the most intriguing stories in the NHL this year. I don't think they've ever been in this spot, have they? I think this is a Stanley Cup contending team that they have out there in Winnipeg. How could they not be, right? They're on top of the best division in hockey. And what's different this year? Well, maybe this is the thing with Connor Hellebuck. Every other season, he's an excellent goaltender. He's been amazing for them this year. I want to go inside that a little bit. But, what about the Jets, eh? With the trade deadline, what are we? I'm going to ballpark it at 6 weeks away. The Jets have never, right? Have they ever loaded up at the trade deadline? I can't think that they have. Has Kevin Cheveldayoff ever made a really significant trade? Not really. But this year, they're in position, man. I think they're on pace to have $30 million of deadline cap space. That means they could potentially add $30 million worth of salary on trade deadline day. I'm not saying they will do that, but they could. They've got prospects. They've got picks. They got a lot to work with. So I do wonder what's going to happen. Are they going to go all in? Are they going to go for it this year? Should they do that? It's a nice-looking team, and they're also going to get to Mark Scheifele back at some point, who's on injured reserve. So something to look at and something to look forward to as the trade deadline looms ever closer. But what are we doing next? We welcome our next guest on the other side. His name is Paul Campbell of The Athletic. We're talking goaltenders, not just Connor Hellebuyck, but others as well. That's what's coming up next. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
Clayson across the line. Clayson will send this into the Chet zone. Sharp angle chance for Smith. Scramble. Hellebuyck is down and he has it under him. And he holds it out with 1:01 to go. Off the bench on the line, changes Stone. Rink wide for Oduya. Back for Stone. Oh, what a save! Connor Hellebuyck robs Stone as he goes right to left.
Three, two, one. All right. Yes, welcome back. This is Hockey Primetime. My name is Conor McKenna, and it's a pleasure to be with you on this lovely, lovely Saturday. Perhaps you're listening to our podcast page at hockeyprimetime.com, in which case, I hope you're having a great day, whatever day of the week it is. We archive our old episodes there. You can listen to old segments, old takes, but the stuff is still usually pretty good, not completely irrelevant. So, what's going on out there in Winnipeg? Ooh, they got a good hockey team, don't they? They're going to get Mark Scheifele back at one point, but they're winning without him. But maybe the biggest story of all is the play of goaltender Connor Hellebuyck, who you just heard. He's tearing it up for him this year. Might he make my Vezina finalist for the first half of the season later on today? Well, you'll have to tune in about an hour from now to find out. I don't know if he's been that good, but he's been good. Anyway, with more on that story, we welcome into the show from The Athletic. Joining us for the first time here, it's Paul Campbell on the line. Paul, how goes it?
It's going really well. How's it going today?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for making time for us here. I do appreciate it. And, I know that you write and focus on goaltenders, so there's a number of them that I want to talk about here today. But do you ever find it, and this is something I was talking about recently, is just how we spend so much time dissecting hockey and talking about, why is this team doing this so well? What's the difference between this team this year and this team last year? And like the Jets are a pretty good example of this, right? Like, why are the Jets good this year? Because they're getting good goaltending, right? Like, I know there's other reasons, but so often it really does sort of boil down to that, doesn't it?
Well, I don't think you can oversell the importance of goaltending. I mean, you have someone who can get in there for 60 or 65 games, plays 60 minutes of each of those games. He's going to have a greater impact on your team than any other individual player, basically. So when your goaltending goes, there's not much you can do. And when it's really rolling, then you're going to be rolling with it.
Right. And so Connor Hellebuyck, what's the difference between this year's Connor Hellebuyck and last year's Connor Hellebuyck?
Well, there was a lot made of his training in the summer. Now, everyone says after they have a good start to the season, I really worked hard this summer, but Hellebuyck took it to the next level. He started training with someone completely different. Adam Consilia is the guy who's getting the credit for this, and he works with some other goalies like James Reimer, Thomas Greiss, etc. And basically, he focuses on not just sports-specific training, but he focuses on position-specific training. And one of the big things for him this year with Hellebuyck was working on his core, namely eliminating the kind of counter-rotational movements, that's a bit technical, that goaltenders get that works against their game. So when you're a speed skater, for instance, your upper body is swinging in the opposite direction of your lower body, and that's generating force. With goalies, that tendency is actually detrimental because it gets your body moving in two different directions, and you're covering less net, less efficiently, and opening up holes. So his training was specific to his core, and it was working to stabilize and activate all the different muscle groups to make movements that were totally in sync and compact.
And at age 24, I mean, where would you? This guy's a 5th-round draft pick. This was was back in 2012. So not necessarily a highly touted guy, and a guy who probably at the time of the draft was considered somebody with like maybe an outside chance of being an NHL goaltender. What do you think the ceiling is for this guy? I mean, I guess it's all about finding consistency, right? And if he can do that, as he has done this year, I don't know. I mean, what is the ceiling in your eyes?
Well, I mean, he's showing us now what he's capable of. I mean, he's showing us what he showed us at several levels. He's had a good career with USA Hockey, for instance, and he's shown sparks of this at the highest level. But as you said, consistency was a problem. And part of the issue with his consistency, he's a big guy, which is usually good for a goaltender, but he was playing without maximizing his strengths. So he was playing an outside in game where he would rely on his big limbs and a lot of movements to get at pucks. This year, he totally revised that, and now he's using his big body like you want a big goalie to use that. He's remaining compact. He's moving a lot less, and so he's forcing shooters to shoot around him. And that's that's an approach that's going to lead to much more consistency. It's not going to be based on flow or feeling as much as presenting sort of a stable, solid base and working out from that.
We're chatting with Paul Campbell of The Athletic. This is Hockey Primetime. My name is Conor McKenna. The show is on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. 9 games in the NHL, 7 still to come, as we've got 2 in the books already. I wanted to ask you also about Henrik Lundqvist, if we could. And I know that he and the Rangers got lit up. When it comes to a goaltender sort of excelling and providing the caliber of goaltending that he's doing in his mid-30s, what do you think? I mean, it is unusual. I remember Dominik Hasek being very good at that age, but the examples of guys 35 plus really excelling and being at the top of the heap of goaltenders seem to be sort of few and far between. Why do you think Lundqvist is able to do that when so many others have not?
Well, I think this is true for all players to an extent. If you're a super elite athlete when you're 25, chances are when you're 35, you're still going to be pretty good. And some people go downhill faster than others, and it depends on whether your game is based on foot speed and hand-eye. For a guy like Lundqvist, his game, after he came from Europe, his game switched from a very sort of motion-driven game, very busy feet and hands, to a very static game. So he's the guy who's best known for sitting back really far and just letting the puck come to him. And that's the kind of style that's going to age far better than a goaltender who's moving and active all the time. So he has that working for him. But Henrik, he's been consistent, one of the most consistent elite goaltenders throughout his entire career. And so if you go back over the last 10 years, you're not going to see these big rises and falls over the course of a season. You're going to see, within a season, you're going to see results vary, but he's always been able to manage to maintain that high level throughout his career. And so I think we're just seeing the continuation of one of the most elite goaltenders in the league over the last decade, just not fading and taking a lot longer to fade than a lesser goaltender might.
We were talking about the importance of goaltending off the top here, and we got a great example of it here in Montreal. What's wrong with the Canadiens to start the season? Why do they have only, one win in their first 9 games? Well, they weren't getting very good goaltending, and that certainly doesn't help. And Carey Price finally missed time, and when he came back, well, since then, he's looked like an elite goaltender again, has he not? I mean, do you have the sense that Carey Price is back for the Canadiens, albeit perhaps too late? Paul?
Lost him. I'll call him right now.
That's okay. I think we might have lost Paul. It happens, I mean, who's to say, why that happened? But it's not important. The important thing is, I know what Paul was going to say there. He was going to say that, yes, Carey Price is back. Because he has been so good. He's had, I think, roughly a .930 save percentage since coming back from injury. Paul wrote something about Carey Price and analyzed his early struggles for the Athletic earlier this year. This was back in October, and then he talked about a new approach that he was using back in December. And now here we are, finally, 2 months after that. It seems like Carey Price is back on track and playing good hockey for the Canadiens.
Paul is back on the line.
Paul, are you there?
I'm here.
Hey, thanks. All right. So I was talking about Carey Price there, and I know that I can go back to October. You wrote about his early struggles. In December, you wrote about what you described as his puzzling new approach. And now here we are. Since he's come back from his latest injury, he's, I think, around .930. So is Carey Price back?
Yeah, he's back. Looking at his movements in the first couple of games after his return, he looked very different, and he was on his knees a lot more. He was tipping forward a lot more. And Price is known for almost presenting like a wall or billboard when he comes across the crease. He's just very upright and very balanced over his skates. And when he first came back, he was sliding, and he was just down, and he looked fatigued. But it seems like that was mostly the result of fatigue. It seems like we were seeing things happen in late in games where he would just be kind of gassed, and he would be sort of compensating by using different motions. Now, he looks like the goaltender, not to start the season, but the goaltender who started playing lights out after the coaching change last season. So I think he's back without question now.
But at the same time, I mean, listen, I know you've been following the Canadiens. I guess, I mean, can I say like your whole life you've been following this team? Mm-hmm. Is it sort of a situation where he's going to be back, and it's basically he's going to do enough so that they miss the playoffs, but and also get a terrible draft pick? Is that the path that you see here? Because that's kind of how I see this, where I see this nightmare season going.
If I want to share a little Canadian gloom, I mean, we can go down that road. I remember checking the standings. The scoring leaders over the course of my tenure as a human being following the Canadiens, and I don't know if there's ever been a scorer since maybe Richer or Naslund in the '80s who've been in the top 10. And that trend looks like it's going to continue because the Habs don't look like they're ready to bottom out by any means. They're going to have Carey Price as an insurance and insulation policy, and so they're going to end up in that mushy middle where they're probably not going to make the playoffs. It's possible, but they're also not going to be bad enough, and they're not going to get scored upon consistently enough to bottom out. So it looks like that kind of season is shaping up again.
Yeah, I mean, top 10 in scoring. Geez, they're not going to have anybody in the top 50 in scoring. I don't even know if they're going to have anybody in the top 100 in scoring. That's how bad this team has been, and just how awful they are offensively. All right, well, on that cheery note, let's wrap this up. Paul, thank you for your time.
Paul just dropped again.
I enjoy your work a great deal, and we just, I believe your call just dropped out, so no better time to wrap this up than right now. That's Paul Campbell. He's with The Athletic. He's also a writer for InGoal Magazine, a regular contributor for Sportsnet and the Sporting News on goaltending as well. And you can read his latest in The Athletic about being a Habs fan and a lifetime of cheering for this team that has, well, let's be honest, in the last 25 years or so, sort of broken the hearts of fans more often than not. Coming up next, the All-Star Game. Well, no, I mean, the All-Star Game is not coming up next. What I mean is we're going to talk a little bit about the All-Star Game. Hockey Primetime not going to the AFG this year. A little bit disappointed by that. I just logistically couldn't make it happen this year, but we hope to make a triumphant return next year. It's going to be in Tampa this season, and just a couple of weeks away. We got some news. Who was snubbed for the All-Star Game? Who should not be at the All-Star Game? I take All-Star selections extremely seriously. And I'm going to tell you all of my very hot takes on the All-Star Game in just a few moments. This is Hockey Primetime here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
Broussard at point to the left of Anderson, won by Braden Point. On right plot of the right circle. High slot Point. Shoot, save made. Rebound is loose in front. Where is it? Johnson trying to stuff it in. Anderson kept it out. Now a rebound shot. Hedman. Score! Victor Hedman followed up. Anderson was down the line there on the board. They make it 3-1.
3, 2, 1. Oh, Victor Hedman. What a shame that he goes down and is going to miss a significant period of time, isn't he? Not great news if you're a fan of the Tampa Bay Lightning. This is a team that has been pretty fortunate this year, right? I think we talked about it a little bit last week, that the Tampa Bay Lightning, after really having a hard luck season last year, so far this year had kind of a drama-free season. And now, well, this is the first, I think, really sort of significant injury. Their number one defenseman and a guy who was probably in the Norris conversation is gone for the next 3 to 6 weeks, which is also a weird and very sort of, so that's a big difference. 3 weeks and 6 weeks. I mean, geez, there's a big difference between those two timelines. So anyway, we'll see what happens. But what a special player he is. And what does this mean? Well, excuse me, it means that Hedman is not going to the All-Star game. So the very important question is, who should replace Victor Hedman at the All-Star game? Many ideas. I think Morgan Riley of the Toronto Maple Leafs would be right up there. If the kid wants to go, I don't see why not. And he's been outstanding. I was watching him the other night, and I got to say, I was watching the Leafs and the Senators the other night, and two things kind of amazed me. The first thing was how bad Erik Karlsson looked. Karlsson is just a shadow of the player that has torn up the NHL for the last couple of years. But the other thing was how good Morgan Riley was. Morgan Riley was the best defenseman on either team, and it wasn't even close. He was really, really outstanding. So I thought that was worth pointing out. I think Morgan Riley would probably be my choice. But there's other guys. There's other players in the mediocre Atlantic Division who could easily go in there and fill that void. So All-Star Game snubs. I got to tell you, when I was a kid, I loved the All-Star Game, right? And I think you probably did too. If you were a hockey fan when you were a kid, you loved the All-Star Game, right? I mean, was there anything better than that? Oh, you finally get to see what it would look like if Brett Hull and Wayne Gretzky played together on the same line or something like that, right? I think that some variation on that was always at least part of it. You know, what if these two great players are finally on the same team, or these two great players who so seldom face one another are going head to head? And when you're a kid, you didn't realize that it was essentially an exhibition, and you thought it was serious and that they were trying hard, and you couldn't tell the difference. So that also added to the magic of it. Now that I'm a bitter adult, I have trouble. I'm going to be honest with you. I do have a little bit of trouble getting fired up for the All-Star Game. I love the event. I love visiting the cities. I love the skills competition even, but the All-Star Game itself, And by the same token, I got to say that there are some people who have takes about All-Star Game selections. I can't find it within myself to get actually fired up and upset about one guy going to the All-Star Game and one guy not. And if I did, then I would say that Brendan Gallagher should be the one going to the All-Star Game for the Canadians and not Carey Price. I mean, Carey Price shouldn't go to the All-Star Game. The guy was the worst goalie in the NHL for the first 20 games of the season. It's got to count for something. The first 20 games, you can't just throw those out the window. But you got to realize this, right, is that the kids that are going to the All-Star Game, and I will continue to believe this, that this is what it's all about. It's all about the kids. The kids don't want to see Brendan Gallagher. I mean, a lot of them don't even know who Brendan Gallagher is. They know who Carey Price is, right? Carey Price is a star player. He's a gold medalist. He's going to start a $10.5 million contract next year. Guy's a superstar in this league, and that's what this is all about. It's all about showcasing your superstars. So Price goes to the All-Star Game for the 6th time this year, and what I would usually say with Price going to the All-Star Game, and when the Canadians were not the laughingstock that they've become this season, was, you know what, I'd rather Carey Price not go, but just because I want him to be fresh for the playoffs. I could be wrong about this, but I believe that, now I don't want to speak out of class here, but I believe Carey Price got injured in the All-Star Game in Montreal. This is a long time ago, back in 2009, I believe it was. But if memory serves, he got injured in an All-Star Game, which is, of course, a nightmare scenario for any player, any goaltender. But at the end of the day, the Canadians aren't going to the playoffs, so it doesn't matter. Carey Price doesn't need to be rested, and the league wants to have their big stars on display, so Price is going to be there. But if it was based on merit, then Brendan Gallagher would be there. But you want to see stars. You got to see the star players. You want to get the star guys out there, the guys that the kids want to see, and this event truly is all about the kids. What else did I want to mention here? From earlier today, we know that the Islanders ran roughshod on the New York Rangers, and Matthew Barzal had himself a game. He did something and has done something this season, Matthew Barzal, that no NHL rookie has done
2 minutes
since 1982. This kid had a 5-point game for the second time this season, right? And he and the Islanders routed the Rangers 7-2. So 5 points for the second time this year. Why is that notable? Because Matthew Barzal is the first player since Anton Stastny. No, wait, Marian Stastny, not Anton. The other Stastny brother, Marian Stastny. He's the first rookie since Marion Stastny in 1982 to have multiple 5-point games in his rookie season. And that certainly is something to be proud of. But what a season he's had already. Matthew Barzal, who is one of the more important players on my in my NHL 18 franchise. I don't mind telling you. He's getting better at face-offs, and I think we're going to go places in the next couple of years in my NHL franchise. Just back to that Hedman injury for a moment here. I wanted to mention that since Victor Hedman is out for the next 3 to 6 weeks, I guess I can no longer envision a scenario where Victor Hedman wins the Norris Trophy. And he might have been out of the conversation to begin with. He is the best defenseman on the best team, and that counts for something. He's had a really good season. And you think about the Norris this year, right? The last 2 winners are out of it, right? I mean, Erik Karlsson can't win the Norris this year. Brent Burns not going to win the Norris this year after the terrible start that he got off to. So somebody else is going to win the Norris this year. And I was thinking maybe this was going to be the year for Victor Hedman, but it's looking more and more like it's going to be a repeat winner once more, perhaps coming out of LA. Don't miss the NHL Midseason Awards, the Hockey Primetime Midseason NHL Awards coming up at the end of the show today, so less than an hour from now.
10.
Coming up next, we're going to chat with our next guest. His name is Scott Burnside, covering the Dallas Stars. Let's talk about the Stars team next on Hockey Primetime.
Hit the post. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Dallas. Beat goes on.
Ah, yes, the radiator heating up for the Dallas Stars. Man, are they missing him here in Montreal as we're under a foot of snow. The Canadiens and Bruins are playing tonight, but as far as Habs-Bruins matchups go, this one probably has a little bit less luster than some of the matchups of years past, as these things always fluctuate, right? Rivalries sort of peaks and valleys, and I think we might be in a valley for the Habs-Bruins rivalry as it stands right now. But you never know. 3 games in the next week, starting tonight at the Bell Center. Another one on Wednesday night, and then another one on Saturday. And so 3 games in 8 days between the Canadiens and the Bruins. And the Bruins have I think it's a 13-point lead on Montreal. The Habs are thinking wild card, but they're 8 points out of that and probably done as it stands right now. The bye week finally comes to an end. 7 games still to go on the NHL schedule tonight. Our next guest is joining us for the first time in this new year, but an old friend of the show, and a pleasure to welcome him back, covering the Dallas Stars for the Stars official website at dallasstars.com. His name is Scott Burnside. Scott, how you doing?
Doing very well. Beautiful day in Dallas, a bit crisp and a little bit later start. The Mavs were playing earlier, so Colorado in town tonight for both teams' first game after the bye week, or bye period. I guess not totally a week, but so it should be interesting. Of course, the Stars hit the bye week playing probably as well as they played all season. And you played a clip of Alexander Radulov, who continues to be, for my money, maybe one of the most fun players in the NHL to watch. So it's been a treat.
And boy, I can tell you that they fell in love with him here in Montreal, and they are missing him in a big way. I think Max Pacioretty is missing him in a big way as well. And anyway, he walked and he went to Dallas. I mean, the fans there, I would have to think have fallen in love with him, haven't they?
Well, it's not just the fans, although that's certainly part of it too. But I had a chance to chat with the GM Jim Nill at the midpoint and heading into the bye week, and sort of talking about the first half of the season. And we talked about Radulov as being a player that probably had exceeded, I don't know whether expectations point wise. He's got 16 goals. He's been very, very good. And if you had asked me to pick a first half MVP, he probably would have been my guy. Now he does, if you watch him, he does have a tendency to take the odd minor penalty, which can get the Stars into trouble. And, he plays with a high level of exuberance, and sometimes that leads to penalties. But I do know that Ken Hitchcock loves his diligence. He loves how he tracks down pucks. He loves, for me, it's not just, tracking down pucks in the offensive zone, but turning them into scoring chances. And Jim Nill was saying that when their player personnel people or player development people go out, J.J. McQueen and Rich Peverly, they often use Radulov as the model. This is what you should do. If this is how hard you have to work. I know his enthusiasm is infectious in that room. And Ken Hitchcock has used him up and down the lineup. He's sort of become kind of a fixer. And now you played a clip. Ken Hitchcock saw a matchup he liked against Edmonton and put Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin and Alexander Radulov back together again. He'd had them apart for a long time. And of course, they scored 3 goals in about 7 minutes and were completely unstoppable as far as the Edmonton Oilers were concerned. But he's been really important because he's played with different players. He helps players get better. And it'll be interesting as the second half tracks along and where he ends up. I think it's, barring injury, he's going to eclipse the point total and goal totals of last season. So it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up. But definitely of the major offseason additions, I don't think there's any doubt that Alexander Radulov has had the greatest impact.
But Ben Bishop has certainly been no slouch. I know they ended up getting Mark Mathot in the offseason as well, Martin Hansel as well. So a significant offseason. And still, though, there were questions about how this was going to work out. And I don't know, it felt like a lot was on the line for Jim Nill with all this as well. And I know we're only halfway there, but it seems like Jim Nill, I don't know if he hit a home run, but he's certainly got an extra base hit in the offseason, didn't he?
I think so. And I think, again, in talking to him, I think there was a maybe a longer than expected learning curve with Ken Hitchcock coming back to Dallas and a completely new system for how he wanted players to play. I mean, Tyler Seguin he's been very good, right? He's got 21 goals, got 40 points. He's point total probably close to where you would want him to be. But Ken Hitchcock has really challenged him. He kills penalties now. In fact, he scored a shorthanded goal on this recent homestand. He claimed it might have been his first shorthanded point in his life, let alone shorthanded goal. But Ken Hitchcock uses Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn to kill penalties. He's challenged him. People think it's, he needed to be better defensively. It wasn't really that so much as he needed to work harder at tracking down pucks in the offensive zone, holding onto the puck longer, to be the kind of 1A center. Think of Anze Kopitar, you think of John Tavares, you think of Jonathan Toews, Sidney Crosby, players who aren't just quick strike sniper type centers. And that's been the challenge for Tyler Seguin. And he's worked very hard at it. And I think he's getting there. It's not a complete picture yet, but that's certainly one of the elements, that took some time with Ken Hitchcock. Martin Hansel's been in and out of the lineup with injury. He makes the team much harder to play against when he's in there. His point totals are disappointing. There's no question about that. He's got 3 goals, 4 assists, but he kills penalties. He takes big draws at both ends of the ice. So he helps when he's healthy, and he's been healthy now for a little while. Mark Mathot came back for 1 game after having a knee scope, which cost him 20 games or so. And now he won't come back for another couple of weeks. So that's troubling, but I think they view this as they need Mark Mathot healthy for the stretch run and presumably for the playoffs. And I think that's where they feel his importance is going to be vital. So they haven't rushed him back. And the team has actually played pretty well without Mark Mathot in the lineup. And Dan Hamwitz and Greg Pattern, who, of course, fans in Montreal will recognize that name, they've evolved into I think, probably surprisingly effective shutdown pair. And Essa Lindell and John Klingberg, who leads all NHL defensemen in points, have really upped the ante as far as their own defensive game. So even without Mark Mathot, things have gone well. And you mentioned Ben Bishop, 11 straight starts. Tonight will be his 11th in a row, and really started to, I think, find the kind of groove that eluded him in the first quarter.
And it's funny because I always think of, and I guess this maybe was a little bit less true of Ken Hitchcock at the end in St. Louis, although Jake Allen had some decent numbers. But Ken Hitchcock is a coach with whom goaltenders tend to have really good numbers and really good seasons. I'd say probably due in large part to the system that he preaches, and goaltenders are often sort of beneficiaries of that. Could you say, and I know you mentioned maybe there were some growing pains, guys getting used to the way that Hitchcock wanted them to play and to get that system down. Could you attribute any difficulties that Bishop might have had early on to that exact thing?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. And I think I think we just assume goaltenders go from team A to team B, and it's, their job is simple, right? They stop the puck. But when you have a player like Ben Bishop, who played a long time in Tampa, and I don't really count his very brief period of time in Los Angeles after the trade deadline last year, but he had tremendous success in Tampa. And when you talk to John Cooper and the players there, he was an integral part of that team becoming the team that they are now. And that is a team that I think we view as almost an annual contender. And he plays the puck as well as almost any goaltender in the NHL, and he plays it aggressively. He and Mike Smith are probably the two best at that game. And when you have a goaltender who isn't afraid to go after the puck and not just hand it off to the defenseman, but to look for the stretch pass, to look for a player coming off the bench, or look for a player crossing in the neutral zone, he will deliver that puck. And if you're not used to that, and you throw in a new coach in Ken Hitchcock, there were times, I think, during the first quarter where it was like, oh, okay, I didn't know you were going to do that. There were a couple times where Ben Bishop has been, there've been mix-ups, and it's led to goals. Again, you mentioned certain growing pains. I think that's exactly what it was. And I think now we're seeing a comfort level from Ben Bishop, from the defense corps, from the coaching staff. I think people are more on the same page. And I think he's 4-1 in his last 5 games. He's playing as consistently as he has all season. And obviously the coaching staff, and Carter Lettonen's been really good. And at one point he played 3 straight road games on an Eastern trip, which was unusual. But it's really been Ben Bishop's net now for the last 6 weeks or so, and they head out east this coming week and have one back-to-back, so Carlet, and then we'll get back in. But it's really been Ben Bishop's show for quite some time now.
Greg Patterson, who you mentioned there, Scott, not long ago, he's not a sexy NHL player. I am not talking about his physical appearance. I just mean in terms of the numbers that he brings to the table, right? He's an honest NHL player. A guy's 27 years old. He hits like a truck, although he doesn't do that all that much. He blocks shots. He has a pretty good shot of his own, although not a guy who's ever going to get double-digit numbers as far as goals go. But I'd have to think now, almost a year on since he was traded, and Jordy Ben, a fan favorite I know there in Dallas, went the other way. The Stars have to be feeling pretty good about that trade and the way Greg Patterson's sort of blossomed in Dallas, don't they?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any question. And there's, it was interesting to watch Greg Patterson's evolution, because he was not, I would have had him at probably 7th or 8th on the defensive depth chart during training camp. And I had to go back and look. I think it was either 8 or 10 games that he did not play to start the season. So he was the extra guy. Jamie Oleksiak has since been traded to Pittsburgh. Patrick Nemeth was put on waivers. There were other players, Julius Honka, the rookie, who's been up and down from the American Hockey League. There didn't seem to be a real place for Greg Patterson to start the season, but he bided his time. He worked very hard. I know in talking to Dan Hamwis, his personality and his professionalism was an important part, I think, of why Greg Patterson stuck with the team when Jim Nill and Ken Hitchcock and his staff were looking at, well, what pieces do we shed? They had too many defensemen. And Ken Hitchcock was prophetic. When he finally put Greg Patterson in the lineup, he said, I think he's going to make it very hard for us to take him out of the lineup. And he hasn't come out of the lineup since. He's played every game, and he has been just very, very solid. And playing with Dan Hamwis, they regularly lead the team in ice time. They regularly play against opposing teams' top units. They kill penalties. And he has really rewarded the coaching staff and management for their faith in him. And it's a very understated, he plays an understated game. As you've said, he's not a particularly flashy guy. But especially with Mark Mathot out long term, his play and his evolving into this role as a shutdown guy with Dan Hamwis has been, I think, critical to the Stars' successes.
Regularly playing over 20 minutes a night after, as you mentioned, missing out on the first 10 games of the season as a healthy scratch, which was kind of the story of his time here in Montreal. Just never won over Michel Therrien for whatever reason. And now here he is, yet another Montreal Canadiens defenseman who's having success elsewhere as the team languishes on their own. All right, what about John Klingberg? There's a guy who's not killing penalties, as he recently, I read a quote, I should say, where he pointed out that he feels like he's not a true number one defenseman because of the fact that he doesn't kill penalties. And purists will say, well, that's why he shouldn't win the Norris Trophy this year, because he doesn't kill penalties. Well, he's got more points, Scott, as you pointed out moments ago, than any other defenseman in the National Hockey League. How much fun has it been to watch this guy this year?
Yeah, there is no question that his, it was 2 years ago when he first came up and he really hit the ground running and then had a lot of points and turned a lot of heads. And like everyone with Dallas last season, it was a difficult year for John Klingberg. And I think early on, again, you go back to learning a system with Ken Hitchcock and then being asked to do more with Mark Mathot out. And the feeling was that when, that Mark Mathot and John Klingberg would be a pair, as Mark Mathot and Erik Karlsson were such a successful duo in Ottawa. And, there were signs of that, but with Mark Mathot's injury, John Klingberg and Esa Lindell, another really talented young defenseman, have had to shoulder more responsibility. And you're right, he doesn't kill penalties. And, when you start to break down the Norris Trophy voting, and as a former president of the PHWA, I think those things are really important. I have not always agreed with my colleagues in the hockey writing fraternity when it's come to the Norris Trophy voting in the last, 8 or 10 years. So anyway, that's my own problem. But I think to be a Norris Trophy candidate or a finalist, I think you have to do all things. It is for the best defenseman, and that entails many, many jobs and duties and roles. And John Klingberg, he's very self-aware, right? I mean, he's going to grow in. He's still a young man. Physically, he's still very slight. And I think this is, when Ken Hitchcock has asked him to do more, his game has become simplified. He doesn't make, he's not a high risk, high reward guy anymore. He is low risk, high reward. And so there have been fewer faux pas, and I think you've seen a great maturity in John Klingberg's game this season. I think it's going to be fascinating to see what voters do, since I no longer vote, because they are often swayed by the point totals. And his offensive game is dynamic, and I don't think it's not just the point total. I don't think there is anyone who walks the blue line with the puck as well as John Klingberg. He gets shots through. He jumps into the play. He's a very smart, dynamic offensive player, and I don't think you can. Maybe you can win a Stanley Cup without a player like that. I go back to Carolina in 2006. I guess you can win a cup like that, but I think you have to have that kind of player on the blue line to be a championship caliber team. But I think it's probably a stretch to say John Klingberg should win the Norris this year. But it's going to be fascinating if he continues to roll up points as he has. He deserves a look, even if he doesn't kill penalties. Again, I don't think he should win necessarily, because I think he needs to grow into a more fuller game, I think, to be a legitimate Norris, to say, yes, he should be a Norris Trophy winner, but I still think he's worthy of discussion at this stage, for sure.
He's a hell of a player, though, and a hell of a story. 5th-round draft pick, and a guy that I know the Star Scouts sort of had to fight for. I was reading, I think it was Dan Rosen wrote about it for NHL.com, that their European guys were sort of saying, "Now you got to take this guy. You got to take this guy." Nobody else. He wasn't on the radar of any other team, apparently, and now here he is with 39 points in the first half of the season. Not too shabby. Scott Burnside, thank you for your time as usual. We appreciate it, man, and all the best for the new year.
Good. You too. Call anytime.
Thanks, Scott. That's Scott Burnside. I'm Conor McKenna. This is Hockey Primetime. Coming up next, hey, we're going to talk to Michael Vartan. You may remember him from such acting roles as that show Alias he was on back in the day. He's also a big hockey fan, based in the LA area. I want to get his story. How did he fall in love with the game, and how is he feeling about his Los Angeles Kings halfway through the season? They've been a nice surprise this year, haven't they? So we'll talk to Michael on the other side. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
Let's go.
Carlson lost the puck, and now Doughty away with it. Look out, might be a 2-on-1. It is with Brown. Doughty in the zone. Doughty to the net. Shoots, scores! Drew Doughty wins the game in overtime. The Kings win it here tonight, 4-3.
Hey, welcome back. It's hour number 2. It's Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio. We're also streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. And, that's Drew Doughty winning the game. And might he win the Norris Trophy this year? I think he might be the front runner about halfway through the season. What a year he's having, and what a season the Kings are having right now. Maybe, dare we boil it down to something? Jonathan Quick looks as good as he has in the last 5 years or so, doesn't he? I think he's got a .926 save percentage. He's in the conversation for the Vezina Trophy. If you have a Norris frontrunner and a Vezina frontrunner, well, you're probably ahead of the curve. And today is Hockey Day in Southern California. Did you know that? They're unveiling a statue of Bob Miller at the Staples Center as part of this wonderful day. So to mark the occasion, we're welcoming in a big Kings fan to the show. His name is Michael Vartan. You may recognize the name. He is an actor from such things as Alias, I think most famously, but a busy man who's taken some time to join us today to talk a little LA Kings hockey. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Connor. Good to be on. That intro got me fired up to hear Drew's overtime goal there.
All right, I'm glad it worked. And the Kings are taking on the Ducks tonight, which should be a good one at Staples Center. I mean, they really do just seem to have everything going, don't they? Anze Kopitar's got 44 points. This is a guy who was being written off by some as recently as last year. I mentioned Doughty's Norris caliber season so far, and Jonathan Quick. I mean, those are sort of the three guys, the engines that sort of drive this team. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that they're doing as well as they are, should I?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly am surprised. You can throw Dustin Brown's name into the hat of a guy who's having a sort of a rebirth of his career. I wasn't expecting much of the season, but it's amazing what a coaching change will make, or at least a coaching philosophy. It just seems like this team, they're having fun this year. Last year was just such a grind. Every game was just miserable. We weren't scoring. The average score was like 2-1 or 1-0, and it just this year they seem to be having fun, and they enjoy playing, and got a good infusion of young kids who are actually getting ice time instead of spending too much time in Ontario. So, and as you said, Quick is playing like he did in 2012. He's really the thing that holds the whole team together. Kopitar's having a great year. So yeah, it's been certainly a surprise. Being a half glass empty kind of guy, I'm still holding my breath, saying, okay, when is this fairy tale going to end? But as of now, by the way, if you told me they'd be chasing the Golden Knights in the standings, that's crazy.
Yeah, you're right. No, the Pacific Division is just, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I knew what to expect, but I guess I thought the Ducks were probably on paper the best team in that division, and they're starting to come together as they're getting healthy again, but they're in 5th place. The Knights in first, they're the Golden Knights in first, the Kings in second, the Flames in 3rd place. It has been a little bit of a wild ride so far this year in the Pacific. And I'd be curious to ask you about this, Michael, because my understanding is you moved to LA at a fairly young age, right?
Yeah.
So in honor of Hockey Day in Southern California, all the choices you had out there, and I know there's a lot of them on the sports landscape in SoCal, why did you become a hockey fan? How did you fall in love with the game?
I think it's the first actual live sporting event I went to. My stepdad took me to, I remember it very well. It was the Minnesota North Stars at the LA Kings at the old Inglewood Forum. And I was about 6 years old, and I walked into the arena, and it was just a sensory overload for a 6-year-old. Just the colors and the purple and the gold against the green and the yellow and the ice and the sound. And it was just it was just the moment I saw that, I thought, I want to do that. And if I'm not good enough to do that, I at least want to be a fan of that for the rest of my life. So yeah, that's basically how it started, and just been a huge Kings fan ever since.
So and I mean, seeing them win a Stanley Cup must have been amazing, like the culmination of decades of fandom. That's something that so few people get to experience, is the long grind of supporting a team forever and then finally seeing them rise to the top. I mean, it must have been an amazing thing, wasn't it?
It was honestly, maybe one of the greatest moments of my life. I've led a very productive life, as you can tell by saying that. But no, I was. It's the only season I had season tickets that year, 2012, and I was there obviously during the playoffs, and I cried like a baby. And also the way they won that playoff run, being up 3-0 in every series, and the game 6 in LA against New Jersey, to be up 5-2 with 5 minutes left, to actually be able to enjoy it and feel like, okay, we got this, and to look around and see grown men. Everyone half the people in the stadium were crying, the other half were cheering, and it was just an incredible experience. And funny story, that summer, the ticket rep called me to see if I wanted to renew, and I said, no, I'm good. And he's like, what? Why? That's it. It'll never be this good ever again. I'm good.
Wow.
And to get a cup 2 years later was just icing on the cake. And that run was incredible, just a spectacular for completely different reasons. 3 Game 7s on the road, and just it's been a long haul being a Kings fan, but we've been rewarded greatly and mightily in the last few years.
No kidding. Yeah, and here they are again, looking pretty good this season, as we mentioned, sort of contending. And it's funny to hear you say that, to talk about that 5-2 scoreline with 5 minutes left. I'm a big believer in this as a sports fan too, is that if you're a neutral and you don't care who wins, you're like, 5-2. I mean, that's boring. I want excitement. I want drama. If you're a fan,
totally,
to be able to, like, a blowout, there are few pleasures like a blowout in a big game as a sports fan, especially if you're there and you can just enjoy it. There's no uncertainty. There's no heart palpitations. It's all gravy. It's all celebration. It's singing. It's laughing. Maybe it's crying. And I love that. And then I have not experienced that very many times lately, to be honest.
And especially, a potential cup clinching game, to just be able to sit there for the last 5 minutes and just soak it in. And I can't remember who the guy who took the major, who had put Scuderi into the boards. Was it Bernier? Anyway, whoever put Scuderi into the boards and took that 5-minute major in the first, where we ended up scoring 3 goals, I think.
Sounds right.
I jokingly, my friend, a couple days later, I said, I'm going to send that guy a bottle of wine and say thank you. That was, because we certainly didn't want to lose that game and go back to New Jersey for Game 7, because who knows what's going to happen there. But it's been amazing. So if the Kings make the playoffs this year, which they seem to be on track to do, I think not going to say it's a lock, because anything can happen in sports. But most of my Kings fans who are my friends are just, they're terrible. Anytime they lose a game, in the last 6 years, they're still sound like Kings fans pre-2012, and I'm like, guys, settle down. Got 2 cups. We're on the verge of making the playoffs again. Just, can't you enjoy this? Why is it everything so negative? And I guess that's just your regular normal fan, right? I mean, we're all we want our teams to win every single game, every night, I guess.
Right. No, I guess so. And
every to win tonight, for sure.
Right. Well, yeah, against the Ducks especially, there's no question. But I get it. I mean, and every fan base has sort of their own foibles. But that's, I mean, once you get a little spoiled too, you start to expect things, right? Just like anything else in life. And you play hockey too, right?
I do. I don't know if you could call it hockey. It's more like ice walking, but I do play hockey. I've been playing for, 30 years now. But I play 3 times a week if I'm not working, which is usually the case. So my priorities are in good order here. Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. It's the greatest sport in the world. I love it. I call it church, therapy, and exercise roll into one. Anytime I get a job and I go on location, I can't skate. After about a couple of weeks, I start getting grumpy and irritated. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Oh, that's right. I haven't played hockey in a couple of weeks. I missed that outlet. That's just great. It's the only thing. Do you play?
I did growing up, and I did for about, I guess I'd say 2/3 of my life, but my schedule now.
Right. So you know that feeling. It's the only thing I have in my life that when I'm on the ice for that hour and a half, nothing in the real world matters or exists. It's just this sort of kind of amazing escape from everything, and you get to play a game. The coolest game on earth, by the way. So it's pretty
I remember that marketing slogan. And the thing about hockey, I remember, and sort of going back, like, to thinking about what it was like when I was a kid, and there's the feeling of I mean, I'll say, like, my favorite hockey feeling is the moment you realize that your shot has beaten the goaltender and is going into the net, but it has not yet gone in. You know what I'm talking about? You know that feeling?
Yep.
Yeah. That's a feeling. That's a feeling that's even, I don't know. I don't think it ever gets old, right? It's just, it's an amazing thing. But I remember the first time I felt that feeling, and it's a special thing. Michael, it's been a pleasure to check in with you, man. Thank you so much for making time.
Absolutely.
Are you playing hockey tonight, or have you already played? It is Saturday.
I played earlier today.
All right. How'd you do?
I think we won 7-5. I was playing D today, so, and I'm getting old. I used to be a winger, left or right. I don't really care, but these days I'm playing defense. I find a lot less skating. Just sit there at the point and wait for the big shot.
Nice. All right. You're the Drew Doughty of your team, maybe something like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Let's go with that. I like that.
Hey, Michael, thanks for your time, bud. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
My pleasure, Connor. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
That's Michael Vartan joining us in Los Angeles. He's a big fan of the Los Angeles Kings and was the star of Alias and continues to work as an actor. And really nice to be able to check in with him and talk to him. Playing hockey, eh? You know what I'm talking about. That feeling I was just talking about. If you have played hockey or do play hockey, I know that you know exactly what I'm talking about with that feeling. Coming up in just a few minutes, so we've got our last guest of this week. Who is our last guest of this week? Well, I'm very excited. It's George Richards, who's now covering the Columbus Blue Jackets. George was on the Florida Panthers beat for years, and then, well, he wasn't traded, but he moved to Columbus to cover the Blue Jackets for the Dispatch this season. Are the wheels coming off the BJs? They lost to the Canucks last night. They lost to the Sabres the day before. Jack Johnson's asked for a trade. What's going on in Columbus? We'll check in with George next. This is Hockey Primetime here on Sirius XM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
I think it has been a inconsistent year for Jack, but I met with Jack before the game. If we're going to have any sniff at all to play extra games after regular season hockey, he has to be part of it. We know that. He has to be part of it. And I believe he can be. I have so much respect for him because I know he's such a great competitor.
That was John Tortorella talking about Jack Johnson. If you haven't heard already, The longtime Columbus Blue Jackets defenseman has asked for a trade as his role with the team has kind of diminished a little bit. I mean, we know this is on the blue line especially. This is Seth Jones and Zach Werenski's team now. And I think it's just 7 points on the season for Johnson right now. What a long and sort of strange saga it's been for Jack Johnson in the National Hockey League on and off the ice. He's been in Columbus for the last 7 seasons. He's been in the NHL for 13 seasons, and he's never been as unproductive as he has been so far this year. So he wants a trade, according to Aaron Portzline of The Athletic, who I believe is my next guest, is the guy who replaced Aaron at the Columbus Dispatch. He spent a long time on the beat covering the Florida Panthers and is now covering the Columbus Blue Jackets for the Columbus Dispatch. His name is George Richards. George, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm standing outside in Columbus and freezing. So.
Oh, well, I mean that's
my new place, and it's there's white stuff all over the place.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? I guess that's
you don't in Florida, you know.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I guess obviously you considered that when making the move, but hey, I mean, on the other hand, George, it was snowing in Florida last week. Iguanas were freezing and falling out of trees. And then people thought they were dead. They'd put them in their cars. I don't know why they would do this. And then the iguanas would warm up and wake up and attack the people. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, oh yeah. You just roll them into the sun and they'll warm up naturally and they'll bounce back. When you say it snowed in Florida, it didn't snow anywhere in my part of Florida. I mean, the north part of Florida we don't even really count. But yeah, we. Oh, it is cold, my friend. It is cold.
It was last time I was in Columbus. I was very cold too, and in fact, they got a crazy snowstorm that delayed my travel for a day getting out of the All-Star game there a couple of years ago.
It only snows here like twice a year, and apparently that was a lie.
So what do you make of this Jack Johnson trade request that we heard about today? You just heard John Tortorella talking about. That's a strange thing to say about a guy who's asked to trade. That if we're going to have postseason success, we need this guy. It's almost like he's imploring him to stay. What do you make of the fact that he's asked for a trade?
Well, imploring him to stay. Maybe pumping his tires a little bit. It's a strange situation. I think the thing with Jack is his role with the Columbus Blue Jackets has definitely been diminished. Like you said, this is Seth Jones, Zach Werenski's team defensively. Jack has kind of been pushed to the side, and he really hasn't played all that great. We know about his financial situation. He needs money, and he really needs this next contract to be something substantial. And right now, if he feels like he's not getting the showcase minutes or whatever to showcase his skills, he probably does need to move on. I mean, a lot of people have texted me or tweeted me like, this Columbus team's pretty good. Why would he want to leave a team like this? And it's because he probably needs to play a little bit more somewhere else.
This is a guy who came into the league highly touted and has had certainly some good years in his career. As you mentioned, I mean, 31, he's in a contract year. No, an NHL player should not be done at that age. What do you think? Like, what's your opinion? Could he play a bigger role on another team and do so successfully at this point based on what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think he could play a big role here in Columbus as well. I mean, I don't think that, that Jack Johnson is done by any means. I think he's still a very good player. You look at the way he played here last year. He and David Savard were a terrific combination for Columbus and really helped out their success. I mean, they were a strong pairing, and they just haven't been this year. So they've been trying to mix and match things defensively. I just think that Jack's financial situation is such that he just needs to, I think that he tried to get a long-term deal here in Columbus. It wasn't forthcoming. He probably sees his future being somewhere else. So, why not get that thing started as soon as possible?
We're talking Columbus Blue Jackets with George Richards. The Jackets coming off a 5-2 loss to Vancouver, and they lost to the Sabres the day before. Any cause for concern losing to two bad teams like that on consecutive nights?
I think so. I think you needed at least 3 out of the 4 points there. When you're playing Buffalo and you're playing Vancouver, you need to get the wins. I mean, you need to get points out of that. And you can talk about Buffalo. Maybe they had all the. Hold on, sorry, I'm outside. You talk about Buffalo with all the things that are going on there in Buffalo, and they had a little fight in them after the practice skirmish. Linus Ullmark plays great in his first NHL start of the season. Okay, I can see that. But Vancouver, I mean, they had numerous opportunities to kind of take a 2-3 nothing lead on Vancouver in the first period last night and didn't, and then gave the Canucks new life. Maybe this team just needs a little break. Maybe this break is coming at the right time for Columbus, but not getting any points when you play Buffalo and Vancouver on back-to-back nights is not a good look.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's not just losing; it's losing in regulation, right? Especially in
Right.
today's NHL, like you can't drop games in regulation. You got to make sure to get those loser points.
It's bare minimum. Get 2 out of the 4, and then go on your European vacation and have fun.
Meanwhile, yeah, that's it. They won't be in action for a while as the bye week is upon the Columbus Blue Jackets. Next game isn't until the 18th, as they'll host the Dallas Stars in a little while. The Stars will be kicking off a road trip after their game tonight. And they got some news that Seth Jones is going to the All-Star game. I guess Zach Werenski was kind of the story last year, and I don't even know. I mean, is it hard to differentiate when you've got maybe the best defensive pair in the National Hockey League, and they're going to be there for a long, long time? I mean, both are so young. Has Jones been the more impressive of the two this year?
I think they switch on and off. I think they're both impressive in different ways. The big talk has always been, when is Torts going to split these guys up and maybe spread the wealth along the blue line? He doesn't want to do it. I mean, because these guys are so good together. They dictate the pace of play. They do so much together when they're out there together. That I think they're. You hate to say interchangeable because they're so good. But it's hard to say which one's better. I mean, if Zach Werenski was named to the All-Star team, I don't think anybody would have been surprised. And just like nobody was surprised that Seth was. And I thought going into it that they were going to get 3 guys. I thought they were going to get Bob, Werenski, and Seth Jones onto the All-Star team. Obviously, the way this All-Star team is picked, because of the divisions and stuff, it's a little different. But and then you throw in Artemi Panarin and they legitimately had four guys that could have been on that team.
Yeah, Panarin, who won the game against the Leafs there the other night, was very, very impressive in that one. And they've got Pierre-Luc Dubois looking good too. I can't help but feel like as an American, George, there's got to be. And I know any American hockey fan is like any Canadian hockey fan. We're sad that there's going to be no NHL players at the Olympics, but Werenski and Jones would be huge parts of Team USA, right, if they were there?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, they would have been an integral part of the Team USA in South Korea at the Olympics. And, I mean, I guess you can just kind of, I'm sure both those guys, we haven't really talked to them about it because, the time isn't here yet. We're still a couple weeks away from the Winter Games, but I'm sure those guys are kind of looking at like, man, that, if things were different, that would have been us, and it's not going to be for them.
It's such a shame, and it just feels like such an opportunity lost because I think
it is.
Team USA would have had, I think, their strongest group that they'd sent in the last probably since Vancouver. Just so many good young players and so many guys coming up. Werenski's only 20 years old. Anyway, this is a guy who could potentially have played in 1, 2, 3, 4 Olympic games, and now the hope, maybe even 5. Now the hope has to be 3 or 4 if they get their act together for the next time around. Anyway, we've gotten a little bit off track.
I think will. I think they'll be back in the next one. Was that 22? But yeah.
I certainly hope so. I'm like, I know a lot of people are sort of trying to pretend like, oh yeah, the Olympic hockey, and you're hearing, oh, this guy's on this team, and it's like, come on, guys, like, are we going to pretend that we care about this? Like, anyway, maybe it's just me.
Right. Yeah.
Before I let you go, Pierre-Luc Dubois, who I remember being very surprised when they took him instead of Jesse Puljujarvi a couple of years ago, and Puljujarvi's doing okay out there in Edmonton, but this kid Dubois looks good, doesn't he?
No, he really does. I mean, he's playing first line minutes. He's been a real nice fit with Josh Anderson and Panarin. He's just a hard-working player. I mean, wise beyond his years. He comes from a hockey background. He's been well coached his whole life. He's got the physical skills. He's kind of like Seth Jones in that regard, where Seth has the skills. But Seth also is he's got the tools and he's got the brain, and I think that's one of the good things about Dubois is he's a very smart hockey player and nothing rattles him, and you can match him up against the best players on an opposing team, and he gets matched up because he is the center of the top line. He gets matched up with some of the better guys, so he's been handling that pretty good. He's only 18, 19 years old. We'll see where this goes, but I think he's a pretty good little player for them.
No kidding. Hey, George, I'll let you get back inside and warm up, bud. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. I left my gloves inside. I'm freezing, but thank you.
Sorry, that's George Richards of the Columbus Dispatch covering the Columbus Blue Jackets. Yeah, geez, those back-to-back losses. Everybody loses games. I mean, even the Tampa Bay Lightning drop games. Heck, even the Vegas Golden Knights drop games every once in a while. But to lose in back-to-back nights to Buffalo, and Vancouver, who are looking kind of like the Buffalo of the Western Conference at this point, after a good start to the season. I think this is who the Canucks are. There's not a very good team. There's no shame in that. They're rebuilding, and nobody expected them to be very good this year. But that's not good to lose back-to-back. And then you get a guy who's been a part of the team for so long asking for a trade. Lots going on out there in Columbus. So nice to get a little check-in with George there. What's coming up next? It's the First Half Awards, the Hockey Primetime First Half of the Season Awards. Calder, Norris, Vezina, Hart, Selke, Jack Adams. Who's going to win these awards? I don't know, but I'll give you my picks for those award winners on the other side, just for the first half of the season. This is Hockey Prime Time, ahead of those 7 o'clock games on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio, also streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. Hey, Rob. Hey, Rob.
Yep.
Do you think I could ask you, maybe do a little joke here? Halfway through this segment, I'll be like, all right, now time for a musical interlude with Shaka Khan. And then you'll play Shaka Khan for like 10 seconds. Do you remember when that happened a couple of years ago? Shaka Khan at the NHL Awards?
Sure, yeah. Let me fire it up.
So like after the Vezina, okay?
Okay.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to the NHL Awards, the Hockey Primetime NHL Awards for the first half of the season. Nice to be with you on this lovely Saturday evening. Man, we're under like 14 inches of snow, about a foot of snow in Montreal, and it's cold here too. I hope you're warm wherever you are. I know this cold weather and this bad winter weather has been affecting almost everybody. A lot of that going on, eh? I mean, it's just been a tough winter all around. It's funny, today I was watching The Day After Tomorrow. I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that movie. Checked it out. I was like, whatever. That's nothing compared to what we've been dealing with in Montreal for the last little while. First half awards in the National Hockey League. I'm Conor McKenna. This is Hockey Primetime. Let's get to the awards. The first award this year is the Calder Trophy. We're starting with the Calder. We're starting with the kids. I've got your finalists for you. And remember, this is taking into account the first 41 games of the season. So, for example, any games that go beyond that, for example, the New York Islanders' last 3 games don't count. So the 5-point game for Matthew Barzal not taken into account here. Your Calder Trophy finalists for Hockey Primetime. This year, I've got Matthew Barzal of the New York Islanders, not because of what he did today, although that was impressive. Charlie McAvoy. I'm sorry, this guy's playing number 1 minutes for the Boston Bruins at 19 years old, and that's a good hockey team. I got Charlie McAvoy and Brock Besser of the Vancouver Canucks. He's been outstanding as well. And your winner, your Calder Trophy winner for the first half of the season, Brock Besser of the Vancouver Canucks is your champion. Let's move on to the next piece of hardware. It is the Norris Trophy, awarded to the best defenseman in hockey. And I've got your finalists and I've got your winner. So your 3 finalists this year, I got to go with Seth Jones of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's been fantastic this year. What a fun player to watch. I love guys who have that combination of size, speed, skill, and the ability to dominate in their own zone as well. So Seth Jones is there. John Klingberg is there. Now, purists will say that he doesn't kill penalties and he shouldn't be a Norris nominee, and I get that. But still, he has the most points of any defenseman in the NHL. He's on pace for like a 75, 80-point season. Give me John Klingberg as a finalist. And finally, Drew Doughty is your 3rd finalist for the Norris Trophy this year. And yes, also the winner. Drew Doughty, Norris winner for the first half of the season, according to the Hockey Primetime NHL Awards that are happening right now. Next trophy is the Vezina, and your finalists are as follows. The aging but ageless Henrik Lundqvist of the New York Rangers, Jonathan Quick having a resurgence with the Los Angeles Kings, and Andrei Vasilevsky of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And spoiler alert here, I don't think anybody's going to be surprised that it is Andrei Vasilevsky. Dude is having a crazy season for the Tampa Bay Lightning this year. I mean, this guy, to say that he's dominating might be a little bit of an understatement at age 23. What has he got going on right now? 2.18 goals against, a .930 save percentage, and 6 shutouts to go with 27 wins. And now for a special musical interlude with Shaka Khan.
Feel for you, Shaka Khan. What you tell me what you wanna do? Do you feel for me the way I feel for you? Shaka Khan, let me tell you what I wanna do.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic! Wow, thank you, Shaka Khan, for being our musical guest at the Hockey Primetime NHL Awards. Let's get to the second half of the show, the Selke Trophy. Come on, I mean, there's no surprise here. I'll give you your finalists: Patrice Bergeron, Sean Couturier of the Philadelphia Flyers, who's been so good this year, and you know what? Alexander Barkov. I'm giving some love from the Florida Panthers. He's my finalist, one of my finalists as well, but it's got to be Patrice Bergeron. This is his trophy. It always has been for the last, 5 years or so. So give me Patrice Bergeron. Finally, or not finally, but the Jack Adams, Gerard Gallant, Barry Trotz, and John Hines of the New Jersey Devils are my finalists. I'm giving it to Gerard Gallant. I mean, come on, how could I not, with the way that the Vegas Golden Knights have played. And finally, your Hart Trophy finalists, John Tavares of the New York Islanders, Nathan MacKinnon, who's really sort of lived up to the potential of a superstar player finally this year in Colorado, and Nikita Kucherov, who's the best forward in hockey. And the winner of the Hart Trophy for the first half of this season, I got to give it to Nikita Kucherov, who's been not just good, I mean, he's been better
30
than everybody else in the NHL so far this year. So that's it. That's the end of the Hockey Primetime NHL Awards. Thank you to our musical guest, Shaka Khan. Thank you to you for tuning into the show. We enjoyed hanging out with you this week. And we'll be back with a new edition of the show next week. Thank you to Laura Saba for her hard work, our executive producer, Sam Wu. And enjoy the rest of the weekend. Enjoy the games tonight. It's Habs and Bruins next on NHL Network Radio.